Hello again. Continuing with the series on the South African conflict and the special units, we come to a book written by a gent who served extensively in the Reconnaissance Commando. And it's this book, A Greater Share of Honour by Jack Greef. And the title comes from Henry V, Shakespeare's Henry V, the one of the speeches there. The fewer the men, the greater share of honour. So Jack served in South African infantry, and then in 1976 went for selection to the Recce's, Reconnaissance Commando. So this took place in northern, what is now Natal. Now KwaZulu-Natal, was then Natal. And it was very arduous, as you can expect. Included an 80-kilometer tab with carrying weight and so on. Really, it's just continuous exercises to find out what the guys are made of and who's going to be there at the end. Passing the initial selection, the guys go on to other phases of training, one of which is parachute training. And back then, the parachute training was done by the Parabats down at Tempe in the Free State. Now, in the UK, when the guys pass selection for Special Forces and they've gone through continuation, they are sent to the RAF, who just train them to jump from aircraft. But in South Africa, the guys are sent to the Parabats, and they put them through kind of their version of P Company. So they just get beasted. And these are guys who've just passed selection and, at a very physical low ebb anyway. So there was a lot of friction. And later on, the Recce's set up their own parachute training activity at Dududuku in again, Natal. And so one of the courses they do in the continuation training is rock climbing, abseiling, that kind of thing, small boats. They broaden out the air ops, that kind of thing. They do a survival course. There was a very famous instructor in the Recce's, Dowell De Beer, who was their tracker and survival expert. And then they do minor tactics. And among the kit they were issued for that was a Puma knife, but Jack noticed in the stores they had Fairbairn Sykes daggers, and he managed to convince them to issue him one of those. And it was only from the fact that he liked the history of the wartime commandos and special forces. And he mentions in the book the background to special forces. And so they do minor tactics, and then at the end of all the training, they go operational. Main operational areas were Angola and the Caprivi area and what is now Namibia, Southwest Africa. And it was quite heavy. Then he took part in the operations, the secret assistance to Rhodesia by South African Special Forces, where they operated as D Squadron of the Rhodesian SAS. But he said, standing around in troopy bars and canteens, wearing brand new camouflage, and people saying to them, well, since when did the SAS have a D Squadron? Because the guys pretty clued up onto what was going on, plus the fact that they were speaking Afrikaans. So it wasn't all that covert really. But then they did the operations there, including the Russian front, which was a very, very hairy and hazardous area of operations in Rhodesia. Then he was involved in what was called small teams, and there was an operator on Andre Dierix, who, or Dierdes as he was known, who had worked in Rhodesia with the Scouts, particularly with Chris Schulenberg, and he lobbied for for setting up a capability which was similar to the reconnaissance group of the Selous Scouts, which was small teams, generally two guys, two-man reconnaissance, which Chris Schulenberg had pioneered, and they did it. They set up a training course, they modified kit and so on, and this became one of the most successful parts of the recce operations, because they were frankly being misused a lot. They were being used as in more or less the Parabats role in a lot of the conflicts, whereas this was more of a classic special forces role, and they did deep reconnaissance operations inserted by various methods, including maritime, going in, doing CTRs of targets that were subsequently attacked either by special forces, conventional assault, or airstrikes, and that went on for it's still within the unit, still a capability. He was then Malcolm Kinghorn called him in, who was running training wing, and tasked him with setting up urban operations, because urban terrorism was on the rise in South Africa. There were the limpet mine attacks and so on. So he spoke to some of the operators that had been sent to Israel and trained with the Israelis. Some of the material was applicable, some wasn't. Some was better suited to the Israeli way of doing things. So he looked around for sources of equipment. He had some special stuff made, scaling ladders and so on, and also for training. And he went to the police, the SAP's Special Task Force, and also to the Railway Police Task Force. Now, back then, there was a separate railway police because of the massive railway structure. And they had a task force who did special stuff, including the air marshal role. So first thing he found out that these guys don't talk to each other. The SAP's task force and the Railway Police Task Force didn't talk to each other and disdained each other, and neither of them talked to the army. So he built bridges, and he found out that the Railway Task Force had trained with GSG 9, the German Special Operations Unit, and they had some really good material. So he was eager to get hold of that, which he did. And but the commanding officer of the recce's said it was a breach of security and so on, but he persevered, and the railway police brought over two guys from 22 SAS, recently left, who presented training, and he managed to get in on that and acquired a lot of information that way. So that became a facet of the recce operations from then on. The book has a lot of really great photos, some of them very, very unique, including amazing photographs. They had a fort up in the operational area called Fort Doppies, and they had a lion living there, which Devil de Beer had brought up from being a cub, and it was a full-grown lion. And there's pictures of it just lying there with the troopies stroking it and everything. Some of the urban operations that he instituted at the Bluff in Durban. There was an old whaling station that had disused parts. They did their urban ops there. It's a really good book, and it does give a great insight into the operations and training within the Reconnaissance Commando at that particular time, during really the busiest time that they had, with their own border war, and also in Rhodesia, and then with the urban conflict. So, terrific book.